Well, welcome to another episode of Christ and Culture. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today I'm going to talk a little bit more about the movie Unplanned that I've recently covered in a past episode of Christ and Culture. I talked about the pro-life movie Unplanned. Now, I just got done a while back with a hour-long interview with Pastor Mel McGinnis of Jamestown, New York, and we talked about this movie Unplanned via Google Hangout or Skype, and we talked about this for about an hour. He had some great insights. Unfortunately, the signal was interrupted so many times, and the production did not work out, and there were problems with the production, and so that 1 hour interview cannot be aired. But I will try to summarize what we had talked about in this review of Unplanned, the movie. I would encourage all of you to go see Unplanned, the movie. It's only been out for maybe 2 or 3 weeks now. It's done very well. It's a Christian-based movie, and usually Christian-based movies, the production level is a little bit low. The acting is usually subpar, because it's not a big budget usually. A Christian movie is not a big budget movie usually. This movie is still not a big budget movie, but the production quality is very high, and the actors and actresses do a fairly decent job. And so the directing was also pretty good. So it's not like your typical Christian movie per se. It's actually more like a Hollywood movie that has a very good acting group and production team, and it does an excellent job on the technical aspects. It also does a very good job of storytelling. It actually tells the story of Abby Johnson, who was a director of a Planned Parenthood in Texas, and she came out of Planned Parenthood. She came out of the pro-abortion movement and is now strongly pro-life, and her story is very, very interesting. And for example, the opening scenes show her in her capacity as a director of a local abortion clinic. She usually did the business end. She didn't get involved with any of the actual abortions, but on one occasion she was asked to assist an abortion, actual live abortion, and she was called in. Very rarely is she ever called in to do anything like that as a director, but she was called in. She left her office, she went into one of the rooms where they do abortions, and there for the first time she saw a sonogram, and she was able to actually see the baby's image based on the sonogram. She saw the baby on the screen, and then they showed also what happens when a suction abortion takes place, and there before her very eyes, very powerful scene. In fact, the pastor Mel McGinnis was talking about this was one of the most powerful scenes for him in the whole movie, because it graphically shows in a well done way. It's not just it's not gruesome, there isn't blood or anything like that. It just shows an image of a baby struggling to get away from this suction abortion instrument, and then it shows the baby in the ultrasound image gradually, slowly disappear. The baby is just gone at the end of the ultrasound abortion, the suction abortion. And it really shook up Abby Johnson. The movie portrays her by a really fine actress, and it really emotionally disturbed Abby Johnson as director of Planned Parenthood at this local clinic. And that was really the beginning of the end of her connection with Planned Parenthood, because over the next few months or so, she began to realize that this was not where she wanted to be. She didn't want to be a part of this industry. She didn't want to be a part of killing real babies. And so over time, it wasn't immediately, but over time, she left Planned Parenthood completely. Now, that scene is probably one of the reasons why this movie was rated R. Very strange rating systems. The movie industry rates itself essentially because they wanted to do that, self-regulate, because they didn't want government regulating them. So they stepped in and they formed a group, a ratings group. And this ratings group determines whether it's a PG, G, R, X, whatever. They're tasked with the purpose of rating these. And this family pro-life movie received an R rating. And it's suspected by most people who are connected with this movie that the R rating was an effort to try to prevent young girls from going to see this movie, and young people. And it was trying to prevent families from taking their kids to see this movie because of the R rating. Because there are a lot of families, especially Christian families, who have nothing to do with R-rated movies, and for good reason. I mean, there's so much violence, sexual content, profanity in even some of the PG movies. But R-rated is pretty much the kiss of death for a family movie. And so the ratings industry thought maybe they could hurt the film by making it an R rating. Well, one of the backhanded compliments of having this rated R, the director says, is that it actually proves the point of the movie, that abortion is a violent act against a defenseless human being in the womb. And the rating industry actually confirmed that there was actual violence content. You wouldn't have a scene where there's someone being operated on and the movie would be labeled violence because of that operation scene if it weren't for violence against a person. And so the rating industry actually makes the argument that abortion is violence against an innocent human being. So in a kind of a backhanded way, the secular rating movie industry confirms the whole point and purpose of the movie, and that is to show that innocent human life is being taken in the womb with abortion, and that's bad. And that's very, very bad for our society, and definitely bad for the millions of babies who no longer have their life. And so that scene right there was one of the reasons, the main reason why this movie was rated R. It shouldn't have been rated R as far as objective violence and so forth, but it was. And so that's just the reality that the people who put out the movie have to deal with. But as it's turned out, the movie has done very, very well at the box office. A lot of people are seeing it. So it doesn't seem like the R rating has stopped people from going to see this movie. One of the other things that we note in that scene is that the abortion doctor is very cold and callous at his work. He sees it as just a routine operation, and he goes in and kills this baby and actually makes jokes about it. And then he's done, and then he leaves. He's gone, and it doesn't even bother him. That is the way these abortion doctors operate. They're cold, they're calculated, and this stuff doesn't bother them anymore because their conscience has been seared to the point where they just come in, kill babies, leave, go home, kick back, relax. It's all in a day's work for them. And the reason we can actually know that that's what they're thinking is the man who played the abortion doctor in this movie actually was an abortion doctor in real life who later became pro-life because he finally came to the realization that he was killing babies in the womb, and that's a bad thing to do. And so he just couldn't do it anymore. And so he left and he quit. And now he's a strong pro-life advocate. He's trying to persuade people to not allow for abortion, for society to ban abortion, and that we need to go back to a human life ethic and not this culture of death that we have today. And he was part of that industry again. So you have two people in this movie, in this very first scene, who were actually bona fide pro-abortion people who worked in the industry. Abby Johnson directed a local Planned Parenthood clinic where abortions were performed, and then Joseph Levatino, the man who plays the abortion doctor in the movie, he was an abortion doctor in real life for many, many years. Thousands and thousands of babies, unfortunately, he aborted. And now he, along with Abby, are saying, don't do this. Don't allow this. This is bad. This is evil. And so it's really nice to have people that can speak from experience and say, we know what this is all about. And don't believe the lies of Planned Parenthood, because they try to sanitize everything. One of the examples they gave in the movie about Planned Parenthood sanitizing this is whenever women would have complications and they start bleeding and they would need medical attention quick, often the directors would say, don't call the emergency medical services. Don't call the ambulance. Don't have these ambulances coming into the abortion clinic parking lot with their flashers on, making a big scene, because why? That's bad publicity, they say. And so, again, that cold, callous attitude, they're caring more about the publicity for their local abortion clinic than they're caring about the women who are facing medical complications because of their botched abortion and need ambulance care to a hospital. The women who go to these clinics, who get abortions and have complications, are not treated as the priority. The priority at the abortion clinic is the public image that everything's okay, everything is easy, it's a very simple process. You just come in, you have your abortion, you're back at work the next day, blah, 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 blah. That is not the way the reality is. And Planned Parenthood knows it, and that's why they want to try to cover up the truth. And this movie is exposing the truth. So that's a great, great thing. Now, in this hour-long conversation I had with Pastor Mel McGinnis, that we can't air, unfortunately, because of the production problem, he was noting that there were two types of abortion protesters portrayed in the movie, and that surrounded this abortion clinic that Abby Johnson was director of on a weekly basis. And the first type of abortion protester was the one with the signs and was shouting and was very vocal. These were loud and vocal protesters. Then there was a second type of abortion pro-life, anti-abortion protester, and that was the silent or quiet type, more reflective. They would pray outside the abortion clinics, outside the fence area. Most abortion clinics now have either shrubs or some kind of fencing to keep the protesters and pro-life people actually away from the front door and the parking lots. So what happens is that the pro-life protesters have to basically walk up and down on the sidewalks outside the fencing or outside the shrub work. And the Planned Parenthood, if they felt that the protesters were doing something like preventing the customers from coming in, or if they were too loud or whatever, they would turn the sprinkler system on and all the protesters would run for cover because they're getting soaked. That was one of the tricks that they did. But there were two types of protesters, pro-life protesters. One, the hardline, who would shout and try to get in the face of the women coming into the abortion clinics for an abortion and say, how can you kill your child? What you're doing is murder, and so forth. And they would also do that to the abortion workers when they would come into work, say, how can you live with yourself killing babies every day for a living, and so forth. They would just shout and have signs and do picketing. And then the other type protesters were more of the silent, quiet, counseling, praying type. And that was the type that really got to Abby Johnson, because those people were not shouting, they were not offensive, they were more trying to persuade the abortion workers and persuade the women coming in for abortion to not go ahead and continue in their bloody work. And that was the type, the quiet, the silent, the praying, the counseling pro-life person was the type of person that persuaded Abby Johnson to eventually leave. Now, I talked to the pastor about this, and he remembered those scenes in the movie, and we both agreed that there are places and times for both of these approaches. Sometimes the prophetic, sort of the John the Baptist type approach, where you just shout out the truth. You know, abortion is murder. You're killing babies, that kind of thing. Bold, in your face, hard message. Sometimes that's necessary. And I'm not going to say here, hey, we should never do that. As Christians, we should never protest in an offensive way. We should never make people in the abortion clinic uncomfortable or whatever. I can't say that, because there is a biblical precedent for that approach. If you look at the prophets, they were not usually the type who were passive and standoffish and quiet and limited themselves to prayer. No, they were usually in your face, John the Baptist, shouting at Herod, "You are a sinner," kind of a thing. And so that is a legitimate way to protest abortion. That is a legitimate way to say no to this evil. But it also is not the way that it should be done all the time, or even most of the time, because as the movie portrayed, Abby Johnson, the director of this abortion clinic in Texas, who changed and left the industry, she was persuaded by the loving, kind counseling of a young pro-life couple. And they were not pointing the finger at her, and they were not getting in her face. They were speaking love, but they were doing so in a more gentle way. And that really won her over. Even though she didn't like their message, even in the soft voice, she was able to see the truth through this quiet approach, prayerful approach. And so I would say, in conclusion of that approach, trying to summarize the two different approaches, I would say that for the most part, I think Christians should oppose abortion with the quieter approach and the more soft sell of the pro-life position, rather than this hardline approach. Because usually what happens when the prophetic voice and the hardline approach is used, the abortion industry people just harden their hearts, and the abortion women going in for an abortion, it usually turns them off, and it usually works against our pro-life position, because they want to rush as quickly as they can into the abortion clinic. And then when they get in there, they are encouraged and reinforced that the Planned Parenthood is the good guy, and the people out on the street shouting, they're the bad guys, because of the way they're talking and abusive language and whatnot. So the best approach, I think, in most cases would be this softer pro-life protest, and not the hard line. Now, there was another abortion scene in the movie, and I talked about this with Pastor Mel McGinnis, and he both agreed this was really powerful. The so-called chemical abortions, where the abortion clinic worker, in this case it was the receptionist, gave a girl who was seeking an abortion a bag of pills and said, "Oh, it's going to be easy. You just take this first pill that basically kills the baby, and then the next series of pills will help expel the baby into the toilet. It's flushed down the toilet, and that's it. Very easy, no problem, very simple to do, and you won't have any worries." Well, Abby Johnson, when she was younger, had a chemical abortion. She actually had 2 abortions, but one of them was a surgical abortion. The other was a chemical, the last one. And it shows in the movie the complications of this chemical abortion. It was not as easy as Planned Parenthood tried to portray it. She actually had a lot of bleeding, and the bleeding lasted hours and hours. At one point, she had to go into the shower in her bathroom. When she did that, she began to have the abortion, the chemical abortion. Parts came out expelled in the bathtub. In one gruesome scene, it was a terrifying thing for her as a young girl. She picked up these parts and put them in the toilet and flushed them down the toilet. Just a terrible, awful, horrific ordeal that she went through. And that was a chemical abortion. That's the so-called easy type of abortion. And so, again, it exposed the lie of Planned Parenthood. They say, oh, there's no problem. This is a simple, easy operation. You just take these pills and you're all good to go. No, it's not that way at all. There are complications that happen. Now, what I didn't mention was at the beginning of the movie, it showed a very young and naive Abby Johnson at college, and she was passing by a Planned Parenthood booth at some kind of a college club fair where all these different clubs on campus were trying to recruit some of the younger students. And the Planned Parenthood young woman recruited Abby Johnson through idealism. She said, well, we're trying to help women. We want to make abortion safe, legal, and rare. We've heard that before. And Abby Johnson said, wow, if it helps women and it makes abortions rare, and very, very rare indeed, and then safe and legal, hey, let's do that. And so she signed up with Planned Parenthood. She began to volunteer at a local clinic. And she thought she was doing a good thing for women. And this is the lie of feminism. Both Pastor Mel McGinnis and myself, we talked about this, how feminism lies to women and tells them that abortion is a good thing for women. They tell women that abortion is necessary for women to be all that they can be, and that they never want to hint in any way that there's anything wrong with abortion. It's a good thing for women. And so a lot of women are sucked into that cause of, oh, I want to help women. But when you get right down to it, Planned Parenthood is in the business. They're in the business of making money. And this is brought out by the film in many, many different ways, especially when it shows the corporate executive team of Planned Parenthood, the national team especially, the higher-ups. They're all about making money. Even though this is a so-called non-profit organization, the people that work in the higher-up executive positions in Planned Parenthood, they're very much concerned about profit. They very much are concerned about running a business. And they're concerned probably primarily about making money through abortions. And at one point, Abby Johnson had been involved in a training session put on by Planned Parenthood, and she was an executive director at a local clinic, and she asked one of the higher-ups, she said, well, what about this whole idea of making abortion safe, legal, and rare? And the woman said, we don't follow that motto at all. We're about abortions. Our company and our product is abortion. And she just came right out and said, we're all about abortion. We're not all about, birth control and trying to prevent abortions primarily. We're here to make money through abortions. In fact, the executive team of the National Planned Parenthood, they sent out directives to all the local directors saying, we want you to double your number of abortions performed. And we want you to go out and recruit women for abortions. And according to Abby Johnson, and this is some more information that you don't hear in the mainstream media, Planned Parenthood goes into high schools and tries to get women hooked on birth control pills, knowing that if they can get them sexually active, their birth control pills will fail, and then they will have to come in and have an abortion at Planned Parenthood. So in other words, the trips to the high school and these colleges to try to, quote, educate women on, quote, reproductive health services. They give out the birth control pills and so forth. They aren't necessarily sincere in doing that. They're actually setting these girls up for failure because these birth control methods are going to fail, and then they're going to get the girls coming in for abortion. So that is really despicable. And they're trying to tell everyone, oh, we have the best motives. We're just trying to help women. No, they're actually trying to help themselves and make money off of murder. So Planned Parenthood is not an organization you can trust in any way. They tell lies. They deceive. In one scene, they show a young woman coming in for an abortion but had some second doubts. The receptionist was trying to close the sale, as they say. She was saying, oh, well, let's get you signed up for an abortion and at least get you an appointment for the abortion, and you can always change it. And then she said, and let's get you to make a deposit today of $50 to $100. In other words, trying to get a young woman who's under duress, get her financially locked in so that she doesn't want to miss this appointment because she's already put down money. And then finally the woman says, well, if you sign up and put a deposit today, we can drop the abortion price 20%. We'll give you a 20% discount. In other words, wheeling and dealing financially with these young, vulnerable women who are coming in and seeking help about an unplanned pregnancy. This is the kind of methodology that Planned Parenthood uses, and this was brought out in the movie. So that's about all the time I had today to talk about this movie, Unplanned. But I'm going to follow up next week with another episode on this movie because I think it's so important, and go over some of the other things that the pastor, Mel McGinnis, and myself talked about in this video conference that the production didn't work out. The video didn't work out. So don't go away. We'll see you back next week. I hope that you're able to see this movie, if not at the theaters, when it comes out in DVD. It's definitely something you want to see and be aware of because it's explaining what's going on right now in our country and this evil of abortion, and we have to know about it before we can fight it. So let's see this, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of Christ and Culture. God bless.